And so we start a part 27 of my Micro Armour Game System History and Theory video set. Now, as you've probably already guessed, this is not a review or an analysis of a Micro Armour set of rules. As with my Napoleonic review, rather than create a whole new stream, I've decided to tack this to the end of my Game System History and Theory because basically, game systems are game systems, and a game system which is applicable to ancients should theoretically be applicable to Micro Armour, which is World War II and modern, and also Napoleonic. So that's why we find this video here. Now, in this case, we'll be doing an overview of the Lost Battles rules written by Philip Sabin and published in a book/softcover version in 2007 and 2009. The objective is to allow potential players to determine if these rules are suitable for them by looking at the basic elements of the rules, pluses and minuses, etc. It is not an analysis of how accurate the rules are or anything of that nature. It is basically all about trying to give enough information to a player for that player to determine if they should consider going down the path of learning the rules and using them. As with all my game review series of videos, I'll start with the basic elements I'll be covering. The first is scale, because it's basically the most important aspect of any set of rules, as it determines what type of game you could expect, what amount of movement you would expect, and to a lesser extent, the force mixes you require. The next most important factor is the game system, such as sequence of play, visibility, movement, and fire combat systems. This will tell you how historically accurate or otherwise a set of rules is. The next factor to look at is gameplay, because that'll tell you how easy or difficult playing a game is. This requires a playtesting, as it cannot be derived from reading the rules, but once you've playtested it, it'll tell you how playable the rules are. This video attempts to provide you with some of the experiences that I've had in terms of playtesting, or actually playing proper games. We then need to look at how easy it is to learn the rules. Learning the rules is a combination of complexity, rules, presentation, and examples. Simple game systems can be difficult to learn, and complex game systems can be easy to learn. So while affected by the complexity of the rules, other factors come into play, and we need to look at the whole picture in order to determine how easy it is to actually get in these rules and how difficult it is. The final factor is supporting material, which is required for players to create force mixes, set up a game, and play the game. Many free rules may be very good, but they lack cheat sheets, equipment lists, and army lists and scenarios. This requires players to make an enormous amount of effort to simply get a game off the ground, which normally dooms the rules before they even have a chance to start. Lost Battles rules has a long pedigree, being based on several different game systems and board games published and made available in the prior to the publishing of these rules. The latest version of this system is called Lost Battles, first published in 2007 in hardback and then in 2009 in paperback. A boxed board game version was also published during this period. Originally, this game was in a board gaming format, but quickly players began to use more traditional figures and terrain for games, at least based on the old Yahoo group site where Philip Sabin himself posted a number of photographs where he was playing a figure gaming set of game using these rules. This is an area movement set of rules, similar to KISS, but with a lot of thought behind it to provide a surprising degree of historical accuracy without sacrificing playability. It is a very high-level set of rules which may not suit the taste of some figure gamers, but once you get over this, it's a surprisingly playable set of rules. Lost Battles uses variable scales, with all battles consisting of about 20 units per side and the scale adjusted accordingly. So, for example, if the game multiple, which is what determines the scale is 4, then a levy infantry unit represents 4,000 men. An average infantry unit represents 2,000 men. A veteran unit represents 1,000 men. The scale for different cavalry are different again. Thus, 20 average infantry units at a multiple of 4 represents an army of about 40,000 men. You change the multiple, you change the total number of men per side in a battle. Assuming you are using a standard 15mm or 6mm figures on standard size bases, which are typically 4 cm wide, a reasonable standard unit size is 12 figures. This means 3 elements of close order, or 4 figures per base, 4 elements of order, or 3 figures per base, and 6 elements of open order, or 2 figures per base. Veteran units are smaller, optimally between 6 and 8 figures, and levy units are double-sized at 24 figures. There are other possible options, and players can determine whatever makes sense, but it's critically important to be able to quickly identify if a unit is a levy, average, or veteran infantry or cavalry unit, and the sizes or number of elements is the mechanism that you primarily use. The ground scale, as you've probably already worked out, is variable as the unit scale is, and is determined by the zones, or one of the 20 zones which make up a typical playing area. Zone width ranges from 300 metres to 1200 metres. If using zones which are 30 centimetre squares or 1 foot squares, then the ground scale ranges from 1 in 1000 to 1 in 3000. However, the scale is almost irrelevant. It's not that kind of game. Let's now look at playing area sizes. If the zone size is a 1 foot square, then the playing area will be 5 by 4 feet in size. This is probably an optimal playing area. If you wish to use smaller zones, you will probably be better off using the board game. However, assuming it's physically possible, a zone size of 20 centimetres is still possible if using standard 15mm or 6mm figures on standard size bases. However, 20 centimetre squares are not very common in the figure gaming world, and I use 30 centimetre tiles because that's the way all my playing areas are designed. Other players may have different sizes. Or alternatively, you can just simply have a single size and just put in some sort of lines which indicate the areas, as occurs with things like D-Day to Berlin, which is a World War II, a modern set of rules, area movement rules. As you've probably already worked out, the game turn scale is as variable as ground and unit scale. Each game turn represents about 3 minutes for every 100 metres of scale distance across each of the zones. A typical scale is 800 metres per zone, which means each game turn would last for 24 minutes. This is a very different scale compared to many older ancient rules, where basically every game turn represents like 90 seconds. Although I must admit it's more common with more modern ancient rules. As games are fixed at 10 game turns, this means a battle like Kane will last for 240 minutes or 4 hours. This does not include deployment time, but does seem rather short. On the other hand, I have no idea how accurate this is, and from a game point of view, it really doesn't matter. It works, and works very well. The sequence of play is classically simple. There is a pre-phase or segment where player order is determined, and a post-segment where the game turn marker is advanced. But the meat of the game are the 2 player segments, each consisting of 3 phases. The key phase is the activation phase, which is where the movement and combat occurs. The sequence of play is optimal, possibly the most optimal sequence of play I've ever seen for a set of rules which allows for figure gaming, although this is rather typical for board gaming, which is, after all, its pedigree. As you would probably expect if the rules attempted to follow any kind of historical credibility, commanders are the most important unit in any army, and each possess what is called organic commands or command points, which are critical in ensuring an attack is successful. The game does encourage main efforts where generals are placed, and not much other activity occurs in other areas. I suspect this is rather historical and does negate a major issue of an area movement game, which is its width is only 5 zones. Players need to make a decision where, at least their commander or CNC needs to be placed, as this will be a critical part of the battlefield and will determine where they'll be attacking and where they'll be defending. There are no specific initiative rules, although a brilliant commander has the ability of flipping the player order, providing that player with a double turn. This is a critical advantage and is normally the kind of advantage that you would expect if a set of rules used initiative. So here is a brilliant piece of game design. They simulate the effect of having, let's say, a rule called initiative without actually having any rules associated with it. A real sign of very clever and well thought out game design. The rules possess three basic quality levels for units: levy, average and veteran. Their effects are built into the game system, with veteran units having a reduced stacking cost and levy an increased stacking cost. Veteran can be activated for movement easier and obtain combat bonuses easier. Levy have the opposite situation. Finally, veterans can rally easier, while levy have a much harder time. Another reasonably cunning game design feature where they built in, let's say, what other rules would call quality or morale into the actual game system as much as possible. Not 100%, but pretty much as possible. Thus avoiding a special section which is, let's say, unit quality or unit morale and what you need to do for it accordingly. Once again, good game design. If we look at the generals, they also have a type of quality, from uninspired to brilliant. This affects how many commands or command points they possess, and some other minor thing. Once again, good game design. They've created a whole concept which is general quality and built it in to the standard game system without worrying too much about special rules. There is a special general section, but it's the overall general section which involves all the aspects of a general. So once again, I consider this another example of good game design. As you would expect with an area movement system, the movement system is very simple, with only 2 movement allowances. The rules support a kind of strategic movement as well. Combat is where the complexity resides, with an impressively long list of modifiers. This is common with area movement rules, as reducing complexity in one area often requires additional complexity elsewhere, and this is where that additional complexity resides. The actual combat system is rather unusual, with an unit attacking or an attacking unit spinning 2d6 dice, which represents their attack value. Modifiers are applied to this, which is where you get your customized features associated with the attack value, such as cavalry versus light infantry, etc. And then this is compared with a combat value table, which is a matrix of troop types and a number for each combination, which really represents the defensive capability of the defender. This value is subtracted from the attacker value, which is the modified die roll, and if positive, a result can be achieved. If negative, nothing occurs. Once again, a little bit unusual, but it works well, it's simple enough, and once you get your head around it, no issue at all. If you do achieve a positive value, then the objective with a positive value is to inflict what's called hits. A hit turns a fresh unit into a spent unit and a spent unit into a shattered unit. And once shattered, the unit is removed. When a unit is shattered, a morale check is conducted for all units in the army, with those closest affected the most. This is actually, once again, a nice, simple, clever way of simulating things which in other sets of rules are rather unpleasant or difficult, such as morale tests, which I always hate in most sets of rules. These set of rules, it's fairly easy to do, not an impediment to gameplay, and the combat system is sufficiently simple and clear enough to allow players to flow through the game rapidly without being forced to do enormous amounts of calculation and spinning of lots of dice. Even though I don't mind spinning lots of dice, this is a set of rules where you don't need it. Here is an example where a combat's result tables works, which normally in figure gaming does not work. Now we come to the actual rules. Unless you possess the board game version, the rules are contained in published books, and unfortunately these do not lend themselves to the type of rules you can easily use in a game. I expect the objective was to memorize these simple rules and simply use a cheat sheet for the game itself. I found this difficult and was forced to create my own set of rules, reformatted in the manner which allows for easy referencing during the game. The one-column version is shown here. I consider this a weak spot in the rules, but it's possible you can purchase a copy of the rules elsewhere that have been published officially that I'm not aware of. So maybe it's not a negative. Let's look at special rules, which normally are a big negative in any set of rules. Now, with area-based rules, this is common, and there is a plethora of special rules or conditions that you need to consider in these rules, even though they are quite simple rules. The simplicity of the core system or game system makes it manageable, and I feel this is the best area-based game system I've ever come across in terms of the way they manage the core system and the special rules. Other sets of area-based games are either so simple as to lack any flavour, and others are so complex as to be unplayable. These rules do not fit in any of those two categories. Another area which causes difficulty in any sets of rules are things like record keeping, strength point markers, and other markers. The amount of record keeping on the playing area is minimal. Simply keeping track of all spent units generally is all you require. Unfortunately, there is an amount of tracking which is required off the playing area, such as game turn track, fighting value, command and army morale. However, this is not really over the top or a major issue, and simply a bit of paper and pen solves it, or alternatively you can use the cheat sheet that I've created, which you can find on the IO group site for Lost Battles. Another area which often causes difficulty in any game system is the amount of calculation you need to do in your head. This is not a major issue in these rules. The calculation is minimal and doesn't impede gameplay in any way, shape or form. The other negative can sometimes be the amount of dice you throw. And while I don't particularly consider this a major negative, some players don't like throwing lots and lots of dice. Well, these rules do not require you to throw lots of dice. Now, normally when you don't throw lots of dice, you end up with combat results tables, which are a problem in their own right. However, the combat results table are constructed in such a way as not to be a major issue in these rules. So I personally think this has achieved the optimum sweet spot for any kind of game system. In terms of supporting material such as scenarios, this is normally one of the strengths of pretty much any board game, and in these rules this is no exception. The board game version contains a large number of scenarios, as does the novel. Now, this is a board game, so army lists are really of no value. Instead, you need a scenario with detailed force mixes and deployment to play a game. And in that area, as I've indicated, the rules are well catered for. A number of additional scenarios are also available on the IO Group website, and you can actually create your own if you are prepared to do a little bit of playtesting to ensure the result is historical. In conclusion, these rules are surprisingly good. They are simple and reasonably easy to learn if someone is instructing you. I've created an examples document to assist players in learning the rules if no one is around to instruct people, because there are a lot of concepts here which figure gamers may find difficult to absorb or to get their head around. Play is a pleasure, with the bulk of your effort determining the operational strategy of what you're doing, rather than spending all your time manoeuvring individual elements, calculating or going through a mass of complex tables to determine what trick you can deploy to win. The only issue is traditional figure gamers may have a hard time getting their heads around these rules, and it certainly does not replace traditional ancient figure gaming rules such as DBMM, etc. But this does give you a nice, quick, fun game. As with all my videos, I like to list all other sets of rules which are good comparisons. And I really did have to think long and hard about this. And amazingly enough, the closest set of rules to Lost Battles is DBA. Although the game system could not be more different, even the objectives of that rule differs with Lost Battles, which is aimed at reproducing a historical conflict, while DBA being closer to a chess-like game for competition purposes. But in terms of the key comparison points where they're the same, they are both short, quick, simple and fun to play. I consider these rules as very good, and they should be more successful than they have actually achieved, specifically among figure gamers. My own conclusion, and possibly the only real issue of the rules, is there appears to be no figure gaming style rules books you can purchase. While the book is, the novel and the hardcover is excellent, it's not optimal as a gaming set of rules. The board game is good, but while it pains me as a board gamer to say this, the golden age of historical board gaming is long gone. It has its place, but it's a niche place, and the board games which do succeed are typically not what I would call historical wargaming board games. In order for these rules to become more successful among the figure gaming community, and I actually consider the figure gaming a golden age, well, whatever that may happen to mean, as not coming to an end, because there is still a great interest among lots of people to paint up figures and set up beautiful playing areas, etc. That desire has never gone away, and I don't think it ever will. In order for these rules to fit into that particular area, someone needs to create a official, copyright version that can be used by figure gamers. No changes to the rules apart from some guidelines of, how to set up your playing area and what a unit should look like, but a set of rules that figure gamers can cross-reference during the game. Well, this concludes part 27 of my video series on game design theory, in this case a specific analysis of the lost battle rules. I certainly hope that this video assists you in determining whether or not you would find it useful to pick up a copy of these rules, learn them and give it a game. Denken Sie daran, immer für Hilil Heimatland so kämpfen.